The black maid took care of the mafia boss's father every day, until he discovered the real reason. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's tale. There's a story of quiet devotion, of secrets that remained hidden in plain sight, and the unexpected bond between two very different worlds. Meet Lisa, a woman who had spent the past 5 years quietly working as a maid for the notorious mafia boss, Don Luciano. She had always kept her head down, doing her job with precision and care, and never asking questions. Her daily duties involved looking after the aging father of Don Luciano, a man who had once been the most feared figure in the criminal underworld. The elder man, now frail and in poor health, had outlived his once great reputation. Yet, his son, the mafia boss, had insisted that Lisa care for him, even though his father had long been bedridden, incapable of doing anything for himself. Lisa's days were filled with monotonous tasks: cooking, cleaning, assisting with his medication, and providing a sense of comfort to the old man who had grown weak with age. She had no family of her own, no real friends, and no one to confide in, which made her role even more isolating. Still, she performed her duties faithfully. She would spend hours sitting by the elderly man, keeping him company as he drifted in and out of sleep. No one knew the details of Lisa's past or what brought her to this life. She had always kept her story to herself. But something about her kindness toward the elderly man began to stir something in Don Luciano. He had always been a man who relied on power, control, and intimidation. He was used to getting what he wanted with a mere snap of his fingers. But there was something different about Lisa, something that made her stand out in his eyes. At first, it was subtle. He noticed how gently she spoke to his father, how carefully she tended to his needs, how she never once complained. She wasn't like the others, the staff who came and went, who did their jobs, but never showed any real care. Lisa was different. There was a quiet grace about her, a softness in the way she handled the fragile man, something that seemed almost maternal. Don Luciano was a man hardened by years of criminal activity, a man who had seen and done things that would break lesser men. Yet, for the first time in many years, he felt something stir within him as he watched Lisa. A deep respect, a recognition of something rare and pure. One day, as Lisa helped his father into bed, Don Luciano was watching from the doorway. He had come to check on his father, but he found himself frozen, captivated by the scene before him. Lisa was speaking softly to the old man, her hand gently resting on his. Her voice, calm and soothing, seemed to bring a sense of peace to the room. The mafia boss had never seen anyone care for his father this way. The realization hit him like a wave. He had underestimated her, but there was something he couldn't ignore. As he watched the woman who had been so quietly fulfilling her duties, a question began to form in his mind. What was her true story? Why did she do this, day after day, without complaint, without any expectation of reward? And as he stood there in the doorway, a new thought struck him. Could it be that Lisa had a reason for being here? Could there be more to her than just a simple maid, doing her job? I had never realized how much my life had changed until that day. The mafia boss stood there, silently watching me take care of his father. I had never seen him like this before, motionless, his eyes locked on me. My heart raced as I continued tending to the elderly man. I was used to working in the background, always invisible, always a servant. But something about the way he was looking at me made me feel seen. It made me feel like maybe, just maybe, there was something more to my presence here than I had ever considered. My name is Lisa, and for the last 5 years, I have been working as the maid in Don Luciano's mansion. My job has always been simple. I take care of his father, an aging man whose health is failing him by the day. The days blend into one another, and my life has been a routine of cleaning, cooking, and caring for someone who cannot care for himself. No one asks about my past, and I never offer it. In the world I live in, it's better to stay quiet, to stay hidden. But that day changed everything. The day the mafia boss saw me. Up until then, I had only been a ghost in his mansion, a nameless face, a pair of hands that moved through the house without attracting much attention. I wasn't one of his trusted associates. I wasn't someone of value in his eyes, but I was indispensable. I had been caring for his father, a man who had once been as feared as his son, and now only looked frail and fragile. The job had been simple in that regard. He couldn't do much for himself anymore. He needed constant care, constant assistance. So, I gave him my time, my energy, and my compassion. I was just doing my job. But I didn't know then that what I was doing would affect the world around me so deeply. I was invisible to everyone but him. The Mafia boss was always busy with his operations, his associates, his dealings. He was a man of power, of control, and I was just a woman who cleaned his house and took care of his father. That was my place. But something about that day made me realize that my place might not be so fixed. It was a typical morning, one of those moments where everything felt familiar. I walked into the room where his father was lying, his frail body resting on the soft sheets. I adjusted the pillows and made sure he was comfortable, talking to him softly, telling him about the weather outside, about the flowers in the garden that needed tending. He had always enjoyed hearing about the little things. His mind wasn't as sharp as it used to be, but I liked to think that it comforted him. He smiled, weakly, and I couldn't help but smile back. I knew how much the small things meant to him, the things that connected him to a life he once had. That was when I heard the door behind me creak open. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. I could feel his presence in the room. Don Luciano, the Mafia boss, stood at the doorway, his dark eyes watching me. He said nothing, just stood there, as if frozen in time. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, but I kept my focus on his father. My hands trembled slightly as I adjusted the blankets around the old man, trying not to show that I was aware of his attention. But then he spoke. "You do this every day?" His voice was calm, but there was something in it that made me pause. His words weren't a question, not really, but more of a statement. As if he were trying to understand something about me, something that I didn't know how to answer. "Yes, every day," I replied, my voice steady, despite the nerves that bubbled up inside me. He took a step forward, and I felt my heart race. What was he thinking? Why was he asking me this? I didn't know, but there was something in the air between us that made me feel like he saw me for the first time. Like he wasn't looking at me as the maid, but as something else. "You don't have to do this, you know," he said quietly. His words were a surprise, and I blinked, unsure of how to respond. "I do it because it's my job," I said, my voice soft. "It's what I'm here for." He nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving me. For a moment, the room was silent, the only sound the soft breathing of his father in the bed. I felt an uncomfortable shift in the air, like something was changing, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And then, just as quickly as he had appeared, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, heart pounding, wondering what had just happened. It wasn't until later that I realized the true meaning behind his words. I wasn't just taking care of his father anymore. I had unknowingly entered a world that I hadn't fully understood, a world where kindness and loyalty could change everything. And that day, I had no idea how much. My life was about to change. I had always known my place in this world. It was to be unseen, unnoticed, just another part of the machine that kept the household running smoothly. But that day, after Don Luciano's unexpected question, something shifted within me. It wasn't just the question that unsettled me. It was the way he had looked at me. There was something more in his gaze than just casual curiosity. Something that made me wonder if I had been invisible all this time, or if I had simply chosen to remain so. Days passed, and I continued my routine, taking care of his father, silently carrying out the tasks assigned to me. But every time I walked past Don Luciano, I could feel his eyes following me, his presence lurking in the background like a shadow. It wasn't just the physical distance between us that seemed to grow. It was something deeper, a gap of understanding, of connection, that had suddenly become impossible to ignore. One evening, as I entered the room to administer Mr. Bellini's evening medication, I saw him standing there again, watching me. This time, there was no hesitation in his step as he moved closer. "Lisa," he said, his voice low, "you don't have to do this alone. There's more to your life than this job." I froze. The words struck me like a bolt of lightning, leaving me speechless. I had never once considered leaving the life I had built for myself, a life where I was merely a shadow. But hearing him say those words made me realize how deeply I had been entrenched in this routine. I had given up everything, my past, my hopes, my dreams, all for the sake of surviving. But what was I really surviving for? I do it because it's what I have to do, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't sure if I was convincing him or myself. He paused for a moment, his eyes studying me as if trying to decode a puzzle. You could have a different life, Lisa. A better life, he said, his tone serious, but with a softness that I hadn't heard before. This job, it's not who you are. I stood there, unable to respond, as the weight of his words settled into the pit of my stomach. For the first time in a long time, I felt something stir inside me. Was he right? Was this truly the life I had resigned myself to? But I quickly pushed those thoughts away. I had a responsibility here. I couldn't afford to entertain fantasies of a different life. I'm fine, I said, my voice gaining strength. I'm doing what I need to do. Don Luciano watched me for a long moment, then gave a small nod, as if accepting my words. But I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken question that lingered between us. Why was he so intent on helping me? Why did he care? It was then that I realized that his concern for me wasn't just out of kindness. There was something else, something deeper, that I hadn't yet understood. But I wasn't ready to face it. I had spent so many years hiding from my own emotions, from my past, and from the life I had chosen. Don Luciano left the room without another word, and I was left standing there, alone with my thoughts. It wasn't until later that night, as I sat in my small room, that the full weight of his words hit me. I had spent so many years convincing myself that this was all I deserved. I had become so used to the silence of my existence, so comfortable with the role I played, that I had forgotten what it felt like to dream. But Don Luciano had awakened something inside me, and as I lay there in the darkness, I couldn't help but wonder, was it too late for me to change? Could I really have a different life? The next morning, as I went about my usual duties, I found myself watching Don Luciano more closely. There was something about him that I couldn't quite place, something that made me feel both nervous and strangely comforted. I had always known him as the Mafia boss, the powerful figure who controlled everything with a single word. But now, I saw him in a different light. He wasn't just the ruthless leader of a crime syndicate. He was a man who had lost his wife, a man who was trying to protect his father, and a man who, despite everything, cared about the people around him. I could see the vulnerability in him that he tried so hard to hide, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the only one who had been hiding from something. As I entered the room to care for Mr. Bellini once again, I saw Don Luciano standing by the window, his back to me. He didn't turn when I entered, but I could feel his presence in the room, as if he were waiting for something. Lisa, he said, his voice softer than I had ever heard it. I know you've been through a lot, and I want you to know that you don't have to keep carrying all of it alone. If you need anything, anything at all, I'm here. The words hung in the air between us, and for the first time, I truly believed them. He wasn't just offering help. He was offering a connection, a lifeline, and I realized that maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to reach out and take it. I had been doing the same routine for years, but something had shifted inside me after that conversation with Don Luciano. His words lingered in my mind, challenging everything I had believed about myself and my place in this world. As I continued my duties around the mansion, I found myself looking at him differently, wondering what kind of man he truly was. Was he just the cold, ruthless mafia boss everyone feared, or was there more to him than that? Every time he spoke to me, I felt a strange warmth in his voice, an unexpected kindness that had never been part of our interactions before. One evening, after I had finished taking care of his father, I found myself standing in the hallway, hesitant. I had never seen him so approachable, so vulnerable, but I didn't know how to bridge the gap between us. He was the leader of an empire, the kind of man whose every word was obeyed without question. And I was just a maid, someone who had always stayed in the shadows. But now, I wondered if things could be different. He had opened a door that I didn't know how to walk through. I wasn't sure what to do with the feelings that were slowly building inside me. I didn't want to let myself get carried away by something that was so far out of my reach. But at the same time, the pull to understand him, to learn about the man behind the mafia boss, was undeniable. The next time I saw him, it wasn't just as the intimidating figure I had known all these years. It was as a man who had lost his wife and struggled with the responsibilities of his life. As a man who had quietly watched me every day, someone who had seen something in me that I never knew was there. He was sitting in the library, looking over some papers, when I entered the room. He didn't notice me at first, so I stood there, uncertain. What was I supposed to say? What could I say to a man like him? But before I could turn and leave, he looked up, his eyes locking with mine. "Lisa," he said, his voice calm, but with a softness I hadn't heard before. "I've been thinking about what I said the other day. About your life. You don't have to stay in this role forever." I wasn't sure what to say, but his words made my heart race. He was offering me something I hadn't dared to dream of, a way out. A chance to have a life of my own, to be more than just a servant in his world. "I don't know if I can," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "This is all I know." He leaned back in his chair, studying me for a moment. "You have more inside you than you realize, Lisa. I can see it. You've been taking care of my father for all this time, with more love and dedication than anyone else would have given. You deserve more than this." His words struck me deeply. No one had ever spoken to me like that. No one had ever told me that I deserved more. I had spent so many years convincing myself that I was nothing, that this life was all I could expect. But now, here he was, telling me that I was capable of so much more. It made me question everything I had accepted as my fate. "I don't know what to do with that," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I've never known anything else." "Then let me help you," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You're not alone in this, Lisa. You don't have to be." I stood there, unsure of what to say next. My heart was racing, and I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me. Was he offering me more than just a way out? Was there something else between us, something unspoken? But I didn't know if I was ready for that. I had spent so many years hiding from my feelings, from my desires, from everything that could pull me away from this life. And now, Don Luciano was offering me a chance at something I never thought I could have. A chance at a life that was mine to choose. But could I take it? Could I trust him? Could I trust myself? The tension between us was thick, and I knew that whatever happened next would change everything. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about what I wanted, what I needed, and what I was willing to risk for the chance at a different life. He stood up slowly, walking toward me. For a moment, I thought he was going to say something else, but instead, he simply looked at me, his expression soft. "Take your time, Lisa," he said quietly. "You don't have to decide anything right now. Just know that I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." His words, simple as they were, settled into my heart like a promise. And for the first time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could have more than this life I had built around me. As I left the room, my mind raced with 1,000 possibilities, each one more uncertain than the last. But one thing was clear. Don Luciano had given me a choice I never thought I would have. And now, I had to decide if I was ready to take it. I had spent so many years living in the shadows, doing the work I was told, and never once questioning the path I was on. But with each passing day, my world was becoming less certain. Don Luciano's words haunted me. He had opened a door that I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. I had always prided myself on being invisible, on staying out of the way, but now it felt like I was being pulled into the light, whether I was ready or not. After that conversation, I found myself avoiding him, afraid of what his attention meant. I continued my routine, taking care of his father with the same quiet diligence I had always shown, but I couldn't ignore the tension between us. Every time our paths crossed, it was as if the air around us thickened with unspoken words. It wasn't just about the job anymore. It was about the connection that had started to form between us, something neither of us had expected. I didn't know what to do with it. Was I willing to risk everything I had known for something uncertain, something that could change my life forever? It was one late evening, as I was finishing my work, that I found myself in the hallway again, standing in front of Don Luciano's office. I had just given his father his medication and checked on his comfort. The house was quieter now, the staff gone for the night. The mansion felt like a different place after dark, still and heavy with secrets. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. Was I ready to face him? The answer came before I could stop myself. I opened the door. He was sitting behind his desk. As usual, papers spread out in front of him, but his attention was on me as soon as I entered. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me, his dark eyes unreadable. The silence stretched between us, and I could feel the weight of the moment. "Lisa," he said, his voice low and calm. "I meant what I said. You don't have to stay here. You can have a different life, a better one." His words made my heart race. I had been avoiding him, but here he was, offering me the very thing I hadn't dared to dream of. "I'm fine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have everything I need." He stood up then, moving toward me with a purpose that made my breath catch. "You deserve more than this," he said, stopping just in front of me. "You've spent years taking care of my father, looking after this house, doing everything for people who don't see you. But I see you, Lisa. I see what you're capable of, and I'm not going to let you keep hiding your life away." I swallowed hard, feeling a mix of fear and something else I couldn't name. I had always kept my head down, always stayed in the background. I had convinced myself that this was all I could expect from life. But now, with him standing so close, offering me a chance at something more, I wasn't so sure anymore. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm offering you a choice," he said, his gaze softening for the first time. "You don't have to stay here and fade into the background. I can help you build a new life, a life where you're seen for who you truly are. You don't have to keep sacrificing yourself for others." I didn't know what to say. The idea of leaving this life behind, of stepping into the unknown, terrified me. But at the same time, I couldn't deny the pull I felt. I had spent so long running from my own desires, from the life I might have had, and now it seemed like Don Luciano was offering me the chance to stop running. "I don't know if I can," I said, my voice trembling. "I've been here so long. This is all I know." He reached out, gently touching my arm, and for the first time, I didn't flinch. "I understand," he said quietly, "but you can have more than this. You deserve more." I looked up at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, and for a moment, everything seemed possible. But then doubt crept in again. Could I really leave everything behind? Could I take the leap into a different life, a life that was mine to choose? The fear of the unknown gripped me tightly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the moment I had been waiting for, even if I didn't fully understand it yet. Don Luciano stepped back, giving me space, but his gaze never left mine. "Think about it, Lisa," he said softly. "But know that the choice is yours. I won't force you, but I won't let you keep living like this either." I nodded, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. He had given me a choice, the one thing I had never allowed myself to have. A choice. And as I left the room that night, I realized that the door he had opened for me wasn't just a door to a new life. It was a door to understanding who I really was, beyond the Maid, beyond the shadows I had hidden in for so long. It was a door to freedom, and now, I had to decide if I was ready to walk through it. I woke up the next morning with a strange feeling in my chest, as though something had shifted within me overnight. The words Don Luciano had said to me still echoed in my mind. "You deserve more than this." For so long, I had believed that my place was here, that this life, though hard, was the only one I could have. But now, the possibility of something different loomed large, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to embrace it. The thought of leaving everything behind was terrifying. I had spent so many years accepting the silence, the isolation, the invisibility of my role. I had convinced myself that I was nothing more than a maid, that my life could never be more than this. But Don Luciano's offer, his words of encouragement, had planted a seed in me, and now it was growing, slowly but surely. I found myself thinking about what my life could be like if I left this behind, if I stopped hiding in the shadows and stepped into the light. It was all so uncertain, so frightening, but at the same time, I couldn't deny the longing that had started to stir inside me. The longing for something more, something real. I had been living for so long without truly living. That evening, I found myself standing in the garden outside the mansion, the cool air brushing against my face. It was peaceful here, away from the noise of the house, away from the expectations that had defined my life. I needed time to think, to make sense of everything that had happened. I looked up at the stars, wondering if the universe had something else in store for me, something I couldn't see yet. And then, just as I was lost in thought, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and there he was, Don Luciano. He didn't speak at first, just stood there for a moment, looking at me with those intense dark eyes. I felt a rush of emotions all at once, nervousness, curiosity, fear, and something else I couldn't quite name. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his voice soft but steady. I can see you're thinking about what I said. I didn't mean to pressure you, Lisa, but I want you to know that the choice is yours. I nodded, unsure of what to say. I didn't want to admit that I had been thinking about his offer, about the possibility of a different life. I didn't want to seem weak, as though I needed his help to change my life. But the truth was, I had been hiding for so long that the thought of taking a step forward, even if it was just one small step, felt impossible. I don't know if I'm ready, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I've been in this life for so long. I don't know what it would be like to live differently. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet strangely comforting. You don't have to have all the answers right now, he said. This isn't about having it all figured out. It's about taking that first step. The rest will come in time. His words made something inside me stir, a flicker of hope, of possibility. I had spent so much time convincing myself that I didn't deserve a life outside of this, that I was nothing more than a servant, a background figure in a world I didn't belong to. But now, with him standing in front of me, offering me a chance to break free from the chains I had bound myself with, it felt like a door was opening, one I had never considered. I don't know where it will lead, I said, my voice shaking slightly. But maybe I'm ready to try. Don Luciano gave me a small, knowing smile, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. He wasn't just offering me a chance at a different life. He was offering me a chance to truly be seen, to be valued for more than just my role as a maid. I had always feared that stepping out of the shadows would mean losing everything, but now, it seemed like stepping into the light was the only way to truly live. That's all I ask, he said. You don't have to have all the answers. Just take the first step. And as I stood there in the quiet of the garden, with the stars overhead and Don Luciano by my side, I realized that I had a choice I had never allowed myself to have before. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to take that step and see where it would lead. The fear was still there, but it was mixed with something else, something powerful, something I had never felt before. It was the feeling of hope, of possibility. For the first time, I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could have a future outside of these walls. And as I looked up at Don Luciano, I knew that whatever happened next, I wouldn't be facing it alone. I had made the decision. I was ready to take that first step, to step out of the shadows and into a world that seemed so far beyond me. Don Luciano had offered me a chance, but it was up to me to decide if I was strong enough to take it. The next few days were filled with a mixture of nervous energy and quiet reflection. The mansion, once my entire world, suddenly felt smaller, more confining. I moved through it like I always had, tending to my duties, but something had changed. I could feel it in every room I entered, in every glance I exchanged with the other staff. I was no longer just the maid. I was someone on the edge of a new life, a life I wasn't entirely sure I was ready for. It was late one evening when Don Luciano approached me again. I had been cleaning the kitchen when he entered, his presence filling the room in a way that made my heart race. Lisa, he said, his voice calm but firm. I've been thinking. If you're ready, it's time to make a move. I can help you get started. You just have to tell me what you need. The words hit me harder than I expected. There it was again, the offer of a new life. The chance to break free from the only reality I had ever known. I looked at him, unsure of what to say. Was I ready? Could I leave behind the only life I had ever known and walk into the unknown? It felt like a dream, too good to be true. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the part of me that wanted more. I don't even know where to start, I said, my voice quiet. What if I fail? What if I can't make it out there? Don Luciano stepped closer, his gaze steady and reassuring. You won't fail, Lisa. Not as long as you believe in yourself. I'll help you. I'll make sure you have the support you need. His words were more than just an offer. They were a lifeline. I didn't know how to explain it, but I felt like, in that moment, he was offering me more than just an escape. He was offering me a chance to prove to myself that I was capable of more than I had ever imagined. I don't know if I can do it, I admitted, my voice breaking slightly. I've been so afraid for so long, afraid of making the wrong choice, afraid of leaving everything behind. I don't even know who I am outside of this life. He smiled softly, a look of understanding in his eyes. You're not alone, Lisa. We all have to start somewhere. The important thing is that you're willing to try. That's all you need. His words soothed some of the anxiety that had been gnawing at me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just running from something. I was running towards something. But the fear was still there, lurking in the back of my mind. What if I couldn't do it? What if everything I was imagining was just a fantasy, a dream that would shatter as soon as I stepped out into the real world? I didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. This was my chance, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. Okay, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. I'm ready. I want to try. I want to see what else is out there. Don Luciano nodded, his face lighting up with a hint of approval. That's what I wanted to hear. You're stronger than you think, Lisa. You just need the right opportunity to prove it. And with those words, everything changed. I had made the decision. There was no turning back now. The next morning, I began making the arrangements. Don Luciano's resources, his connections, would give me the opportunity to start fresh. He wasn't offering me a handout. He was giving me a platform to stand on, a chance to build my own life. But it was up to me to make it work. I couldn't rely on anyone else, not completely. This was my journey, and I was going to take it, no matter how uncertain the path ahead seemed. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I was no longer the maid, the background figure in Don Luciano's world. I was Lisa, a woman with a future, a woman who was ready to take control of her own destiny. As I stepped out of the mansion that day, I knew that the world ahead was vast and full of possibilities. I didn't know where this journey would take me, but for the first time in my life, I was excited to find out. The past was behind me, and the future was waiting, and I was ready to face it head on. I had made the decision. There was no turning back now. The day after my conversation with Don Luciano, I began the process of changing my life. He had given me everything I needed, an opportunity to escape my past and build something new. But what would that new life look like? What did I truly want? It was a question I had never allowed myself to answer. For so long, I had lived for others, for Don Luciano's father, for the mansion, for the world that had kept me hidden in plain sight. But now, I was beginning to see that I was more than just the role I had been given. I was a person with hopes, with a future that could be mine to shape. The first step was simple. I packed my belongings, all the things I had accumulated over the years, some clothes, a few keepsakes, a handful of memories that had once been all I had. As I packed my things, I couldn't help but think about how little I had to show for all the years I had spent in the mansion. I had no real savings, no family to turn to, no friends outside of the people I worked with. But I wasn't afraid. I was determined. I had spent too long playing a part in someone else's world. Now, it was time to create my own. Later that day, Don Luciano sat down with me once again. This time, his demeanor was different. There was a softness in his eyes, a quiet respect that hadn't been there before. Lisa, he said, his voice steady but with a hint of something else beneath it. I know you're ready for this. You've shown strength I didn't expect, but I want you to know you don't have to do this alone. He was offering me more than just financial help or a new job. He was offering me his support, his protection. It was a gesture that spoke volumes. In a world as dangerous as his, trust was rare. But he was giving it to me, and that meant something. Thank you, I said, feeling a swell of emotion in my chest. But this is my choice. I need to do this on my own. He nodded, as if understanding. I get it. But remember, Lisa, you don't have to be alone in this. I'm here, if you ever need anything. With that, the conversation ended, but his words stayed with me. I had always kept to myself, always been the quiet observer. But now, as I stepped away from everything I knew, I realized that I was no longer invisible. I was stepping into the world as myself, not as a servant, not as someone else's shadow. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change. I moved into a small apartment in a quiet part of the city, far from the mansion, far from the life I had known. It was a modest place, but it was mine. For the first time in my life, I had a space that was truly my own, a place where I could breathe without feeling like I was being watched or controlled. I started looking for work, but it wasn't easy. The world outside the mansion felt vast, intimidating, and unfamiliar. The skills I had developed in my years as a maid didn't easily translate into the kind of job I wanted. But I didn't give up. I kept searching, kept pushing forward. One afternoon, I received a phone call that changed everything. It was from a woman named Claire. She had a position available at a boutique that specialized in high-end home decor, and she was interested in hiring me as a personal assistant. I was stunned. The job was exactly what I had been hoping for, a chance to work in a professional environment, to leave behind the life I had been living. It was a small step, but it was a step towards something bigger. As I started my new job, I realized that the path ahead was full of opportunities, but it also came with challenges. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time, I was facing it with hope instead of fear. I was no longer just a maid. I was Lisa, a woman who was building her own future. It wasn't easy. There were days when I doubted myself, when I wanted to give up and return to the safety of my old life. But then I would remember what Don Luciano had said to me. You deserve more than this. And with those words in my mind, I kept going. Little by little, I was creating a life I could be proud of. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but it was mine. And that made all the difference. I had finally settled into my new life, and yet, something still felt off. I had moved into my small apartment, found work at the boutique, and was slowly making friends. But even in this new world, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I knew that Don Luciano had helped me, that he had given me a chance, but there was always this lingering thought at the back of my mind. Was I just a pawn in his game? Was he expecting something in return? I pushed these thoughts away, focusing on my work, on my new life. But they kept coming back. I hadn't spoken to Don Luciano since I left the mansion. It wasn't that I didn't wanna. It was just that I had convinced myself that I needed to stand on my own. I had finally taken control of my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially him, take that away from me. But then came the phone call. It was late, and I was just finishing up my shift at the boutique when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but when I answered, I was met with a voice I would never forget. Lisa, it's me, Don Luciano. His voice was steady, like always, but there was something in it that made my heart skip a beat. I need to see you. It's important. I froze. Part of me wanted to say no, to hang up the phone and go back to my quiet, simple life. But another part of me, the part that I had buried deep down, knew that I couldn't ignore him forever. I'll come by in an hour, I said, my voice betraying the anxiety that bubbled up inside me. When I arrived at the mansion, the familiar sight of the large gates and the imposing structure made my heart race. I hadn't been back since I left, and seeing it again brought back a rush of memories. I hesitated for a moment before stepping out of the car. As I walked up the steps, the weight of what I had left behind felt heavier than I had expected. But this time, I was not the same person who had entered those doors months ago. I had changed. The door opened before I could knock, and there he was, standing in the doorway, Don Luciano. He looked the same as always, dressed in his usual tailored suit, his dark eyes fixed on me. But there was something different in his gaze now. Come in, Lisa, he said softly, stepping aside to let me enter. I followed him inside, my heart racing as I wondered what he wanted from me this time. We walked into the grand sitting room, and I could feel the tension in the air. He gestured for me to sit, and I did, unsure of what was coming next. I've been keeping an eye on you, Lisa, he said after a long silence, his voice low. I see you're doing well. I'm proud of you, but I need to know if you're truly ready for what comes next. His words caught me off guard. What do you mean? I asked, my voice betraying my confusion. I gave you a chance to leave, to start over. But that was only the beginning. You're capable of so much more than this life, Lisa. And now, I'm offering you the chance to be a part of something much bigger. The room seemed to close in around me as I tried to process what he was saying. I've been running from this world for so long, I said, my voice shaky. I thought leaving was enough. I didn't want to be part of anything like this again. Don Luciano studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. I understand your hesitation, but the truth is, this world will always be a part of you, whether you like it or not. I'm not asking you to go back to the way things were, Lisa. I'm asking you to take control, to be a part of something that could change everything. The silence between us stretched on, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. What was he really asking? Was this the chance I had been waiting for, or was it just another trap? I don't know if I can, I said finally, my voice trembling. I've already made a life for myself. I've built something new. I don't want to lose it. He leaned forward, his gaze softening. You don't have to lose it, Lisa. You're not alone anymore. I'm offering you the opportunity to build something even bigger, to have more than you ever thought possible. But it's up to you to decide if you're ready. I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Was I ready to take that step? Was I ready to be part of this world again, to risk everything I had worked so hard to build? I didn't know. But as I looked at Don Luciano, I realized that this time, it wasn't about the job, or the mansion, or the money. It was about me. It was about what I wanted, what I was willing to fight for. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop running from my past and start embracing the future that was waiting for me. I'll think about it, I said finally, my voice steady. But I need time. He nodded, a slight smile playing at the corner of his lips. Take all the time you need. But remember, Lisa, the opportunity will always be there, if you decide to take it. As I left the mansion that night, I realized that I had reached a crossroads. I had a choice to make. The future was waiting, but it was up to me to decide if I was ready to take the leap. I spent the next few days reflecting on everything Don Luciano had said to me. The weight of his offer, his expectations, and my own fear all swirled around in my mind. Like a storm I couldn't escape. I had come so far, made so many changes, yet here I was, faced with the question that had always terrified me. Was I really ready to take control of my life, to take responsibility for what came next? I had already built something for myself, a life outside of the mansion, outside of his world. But was it enough? Or was there more waiting for me, something greater than what I had allowed myself to imagine? It wasn't just about what Don Luciano wanted me to do. It was about what I wanted for myself. Could I continue down the path I had chosen, or would I let myself be pulled back into the world I had left behind? It was a decision I knew I couldn't take lightly. I went to bed that night with no clear answer, only a restless feeling in my chest, as if something was calling me forward, but I couldn't yet see where it would lead. The next day, I went to work at the boutique like any other day. The rhythmic tasks of organizing, folding clothes, and interacting with customers kept me busy, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept replaying Don Luciano's words in my head. You don't have to do this alone, and I'm offering you the opportunity to build something even bigger. The words echoed in my thoughts, both tempting and terrifying. By the end of the day, I knew that I couldn't keep avoiding the truth. I couldn't keep running from the choices I had to make. That evening, as the sun began to set and the city came alive with lights, I walked into the quiet of my apartment. It was small, but it had become my sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe, where I could be myself. But even here, in my own space, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I sat by the window, staring out at the busy street below, feeling more isolated than I had in a long time. My life felt like it was at a standstill. I had to make a decision. I had to choose if I was going to continue this quiet existence, or if I was going to take a chance on something bigger, something that might change everything. My thoughts were interrupted by the sudden buzz of my phone. It was a message from Don Luciano. *, meet me tonight, Lisa. Let's talk. *, my heart skipped a beat. I knew what this meant. He wasn't going to let me delay the decision any longer. This was the moment. There was no more running. I quickly texted back, agreeing to meet him. As I got ready, I couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and anticipation. I had no idea what he expected from me, but I knew one thing for sure. This was the moment that would define the rest of my life. I arrived at the mansion, the familiar gates opening in front of me as I drove through. The house loomed ahead, a symbol of everything I had left behind, but also everything I was about to confront. I parked and walked up the steps, the weight of the decision pressing down on me with every step. Don Luciano was waiting for me in the same sitting room where we had spoken before. This time, there was no tension in the air, no weight of unspoken words. He greeted me with a small smile, and for the first time, he seemed less like the powerful Mafia boss and more like a man who was genuinely trying to help me. You've had time to think, he said, his voice steady but kind. I know this is not an easy decision, but I need to know, Lisa, are you ready? I felt my heart race as I sat down across from him. I had no more excuses, no more hesitation. This was it. I'm ready, I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. I want to take that step. I want to see what's out there. I want to build something for myself. Don Luciano's expression softened, and for the first time, I saw something like pride in his eyes. Good, he said, nodding slowly. I knew you were ready. Now let's talk about what happens next. He laid out his plan for me, how he would use his connections, his resources, to help me get started in a new career, how he would provide me with the support I needed without pulling me back into the world I had left. I listened carefully, absorbing every word, feeling both terrified and exhilarated at the same time. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for, but it wasn't just about the resources or the connections. It was about the trust he was placing in me, and the trust one was learning to place in myself. After we finished talking, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. I wasn't just going through the motions anymore. I was taking control. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I knew that no matter what happened next, I had the strength to face it. As I left the mansion that night, I realized that I was no longer the person who had walked in months ago. I had changed. And with that change, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I woke up the next morning with a sense of purpose I had never felt before. The conversation with Don Luciano had shifted something deep within me. I had made the choice to take that first step into a new life, and although the path ahead was uncertain, it felt like the beginning of something far greater than I had ever imagined. I spent the day settling into my new reality, preparing for the next chapter. I continued working at the boutique, but I could feel the changes inside me. My confidence was growing, and I knew that soon, my life would be very different from the one I had left behind. As the days passed, Don Luciano's offer became more concrete. He followed through on his promise, introducing me to his network, providing me with the tools I needed to build a career outside the confines of the mansion. But as much as I appreciated the opportunity, there was still a part of me that struggled to let go of the past. I had spent years hiding in the shadows, and it was difficult to shake the fear that it might all come crashing down. Would I succeed, or would I fail and be forced to return to the only world I had ever known? The uncertainty was both thrilling and terrifying. One evening, as I was closing up the boutique after a long day, I received a text message from Don Luciano. *, we need to talk. Meet me at the office. *, my heart skipped a beat. I had been focused on moving forward, but now it seemed like the past was pulling me back. I didn't want to go, but I knew that I couldn't avoid him forever. I had made a promise to myself, and I couldn't let fear stop me now. I drove to his office, the familiar drive feeling strangely different. The city seemed to have changed around me, and I wondered if I had changed too. When I arrived, Don Luciano was waiting for me. He wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize stood beside him. Don Luciano motioned for me to sit, and I did, trying to steady my nerves. *Lisa, he said, his voice calm but serious. "This is Marco, one of my most trusted associates. We have an opportunity for you. Something that will help you secure your future." My stomach tightened. What was he asking of me? What did this new opportunity entail? "I'm listening," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear creeping in. Don Luciano and Marco exchanged a look before Don Luciano turned back to me. "We've been watching your progress," he said, his voice firm. "You've done well so far. But now we need to take it to the next level. I'm offering you a position in my organization. A real position, one that gives you power, influence, and control over your future. You won't be just another maid, Lisa. You'll be someone who matters." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't prepared for this. I had come so far, and now, it seemed like I was being asked to step back into the very world I had left behind. But this time, it was different. This time, I wouldn't be hiding in the shadows. This time, I would have power. The thought was both intoxicating and terrifying. What exactly would I be doing? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was racing. Don Luciano leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You will be working with Marco. You will help manage some of the more sensitive aspects of our business. You'll be using your skills, your intelligence, to help us grow." He paused, watching my reaction. "This is your chance, Lisa. You've worked hard to get here. But this is the next step. You can't go back." I sat there, in silence, the weight of his words pressing down on me. He was right. There was no going back. The life I had left behind was no longer an option, but neither was this new life. Was I ready to step into this world fully, to accept the power and responsibility that came with it? I had always known there was more to me than what I had been doing, but I had never imagined this. Never imagined that I would be offered a position in the very world I had tried to escape. What happens if I say no? I asked, the question escaping my lips before I could stop it. Don Luciano's gaze never wavered. "Then you walk away. But remember, Lisa, You can't unknow what you know now. You can't go back to the life you had before. Once you step into this world, there's no turning back. It's up to you. I thought about it for a long moment, the decision weighing heavily on me. I had spent so long trying to outrun this life, trying to build something else, but now it seemed like there was no escape from it. I had been given a choice, a chance to be more, to be someone who mattered. And yet, the fear of losing everything I had worked for still lingered. I'll do it, I said finally, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. I'm ready to step up. I want this. Don Luciano smiled, a look of approval crossing his face. Good, he said, standing up. I knew you were ready. Welcome to the next chapter, Lisa. As I walked out of the office that night, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. I had just taken a step into a world that terrified me, but for the first time, I felt like I was in control of my own future. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it, whatever came my way. I had made my decision, and there was no going back. The choice to step fully into Don Luciano's world was one I didn't make lightly. I had spent so long trying to distance myself from this life, but now I was being pulled back into it, not as a maid, not as a shadow, but as someone with power, someone who had a role to play. The days that followed felt like a blur. I met with Marco, Don Luciano's associate, and he began to show me the ropes. It wasn't easy. The world I was entering was far from simple, and the stakes were high. Every move mattered. Every word carried weight. Marco was patient with me, but he didn't sugarcoat anything. You'll need to be sharp, he told me one day as we reviewed some documents. People will expect a lot from you. Don Luciano trusts you, but that trust will be tested. There's no room for mistakes. His words were clear, and the pressure was mounting, but I had made my choice. I couldn't back out now. I had spent so many years doubting my ability to change my life, but now that I had the chance, I wasn't going to waste it. The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, decisions, and challenges. I was learning things about the business I never could have imagined. I was working alongside powerful figures, people who had been in this world for decades. They didn't trust easily, but over time, I earned their respect. I wasn't just another maid anymore. I was part of the team. And yet, every day, the fear still lingered. What if I wasn't cut out for this? What if I wasn't as strong as I thought? But then, in moments of doubt, I would remind myself of why I was here. This was my chance to build something of my own. No one could take that away from me. One evening, after a particularly grueling meeting, Don Luciano called me into his office. My heart raced as I walked down the familiar hallway. I had been working nonstop, and I knew he had been keeping a close eye on my progress. When I entered his office, I found him sitting behind his desk, looking more contemplative than usual. Lisa, he said, his voice softer than it had ever been before. You've done well so far. I knew you had the potential, but I want you to understand something. This world isn't for the faint of heart. The choices we make here, they matter. And sometimes, the decisions are harder than you can imagine. I nodded, unsure of where this conversation was going. I'm ready for whatever comes next, I said, trying to sound confident, even though a part of me still felt like I was walking on thin ice. He studied me for a long moment, then leaned forward, his eyes serious. There's a new challenge ahead. A test, if you will. I'm offering you more responsibility. But with that comes more danger, more risk. You'll be in charge of overseeing a new operation, something that's critical to the future of the family. Do you think you're ready for that? My mind raced. A new operation? More responsibility? It was a huge leap, but I could feel the weight of the opportunity. This was my chance to prove myself. I am, I said, my voice steady. I won't let you down. Don Luciano nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. I know you won't. But remember, Lisa, with power comes responsibility. And not just to me, but to everyone you work with. You'll have to make decisions that will affect people's lives. Are you ready to carry that weight? I paused, the gravity of his words sinking in. I had been so focused on the opportunities that I hadn't fully considered the consequences. But I had no choice now. I had to be ready. I'm ready, I said again, this time with more conviction. Don Luciano stood and walked around his desk, placing a hand on my shoulder. Good. I'm counting on you. As I left his office that night, I felt a new sense of purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was mine to navigate. I was no longer just the maid in the background. I was a key player in this world, and I had the power to shape my own future. The next day, I dove headfirst into my new role. There were days when I doubted myself, when the weight of the responsibility seemed too much to bear. But with each challenge, I grew stronger. I was learning, evolving, and slowly, I was becoming the person I had always wanted to be. The fear was still there, but now, it was replaced with determination. I was no longer afraid of what I might lose. I was focused on what I could gain. This was my chance to build the life I had always dreamed of, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. Don Luciano had given me the opportunity to take control, and now it was up to me to make the most of it. The path ahead was anything but easy, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. I had come so far, but the true test was just beginning. The weight of responsibility that Don Luciano had placed on me now felt heavier than ever. It wasn't just about the role I played in his organization anymore. It was about the choices I had to make, the lives I had to affect, and the future I was carving out for myself. Every day, I faced decisions that weren't easy. The power and influence that had been given to me came with consequences I hadn't fully prepared for. But I was learning. Slowly, I was becoming someone I never thought I could be. Someone who could make decisions, who could lead, and who could stand her ground in a world that was far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. Don Luciano's presence in my life had been a turning point, but it wasn't just his influence that guided me anymore. It was my own strength, my own ability to rise above the circumstances I had been dealt. As the weeks passed, I started to trust myself more. There were moments of doubt, of course, moments when I wondered if I was in over my head. But I kept going. I kept pushing forward, determined to prove that I wasn't just a product of my past. I was someone who could stand on her own, even in a world like this. One night, as I sat at my desk in the office, reviewing documents for a new operation, I felt the familiar weight of eyes on me. I looked up to find Don Luciano standing in the doorway. He had a look on his face that I couldn't quite place, a mixture of pride and something else I couldn't identify. "You've done well," he said, his voice calm, but with a depth of meaning behind it. "You've earned my respect." My heart skipped a beat. It was rare for him to express his feelings so openly, and hearing those words from him meant more than I could say. I had worked so hard to get here, and to know that I had gained his approval, that I had proven myself to be more than just a maid, felt like a victory. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady, though inside, I was overwhelmed with emotion. He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. "There's something I need to discuss with you," he said, his tone serious. "A new opportunity has arisen, and I need someone I can trust to oversee it. I'm offering you a chance to take this organization to the next level, Lisa. You've earned it." The words hit me like a punch. Another opportunity? Another chance to prove myself? I had already taken on so much responsibility, but something in me told me I wasn't done yet. What exactly would this involve? I asked, my mind racing. "You'll be in charge of a new venture. It's risky, but if anyone can handle it, it's you," he replied, his gaze never leaving mine. I thought for a moment, weighing the offer. This was my chance to solidify my place, to take full control of my future. But it was also a chance to get deeper into this world, a world I had tried to escape not so long ago. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't afraid anymore. "I'm ready," I said, my voice unwavering. "I'll take it." Don Luciano nodded, his expression softening. "I knew you would. You're more than capable of handling this. You've proven yourself time and time again, Lisa. But remember, the responsibility that comes with this is greater than anything you've done before. I trust you to make the right decisions, no matter how difficult they may be." The weight of his words settled in my chest, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt empowered. This was what I had worked for. This was the moment I had been preparing for. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I took on the new responsibility, overseeing operations, managing people, making decisions that would affect the future of the business. It wasn't easy, but I thrived in the chaos. The fear that had once held me back now pushed me forward, driving me to prove to myself that I could handle anything that came my way. Don Luciano's trust in me was more than just an opportunity. It was a challenge that I was determined to rise to. As I stood in the office late one night, looking out over the city below, I realized how far I had come. From the quiet, invisible maid in the mansion to the woman standing at the helm of something far bigger than herself. I had transformed. The future was no longer something I feared. It was something I controlled. And as I thought about all I had achieved, I knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The road ahead would be full of challenges, but I was ready to face them. The power I had been given was not just about control. It was about the freedom to choose my own path, to create the life I wanted. And I was determined to make it a life worth living. In this captivating journey, a woman takes a leap from a life of obscurity to one filled with power and romance. Following her escape from a life of servitude in a mansion, she is given a second chance to prove herself in a world she once feared. As she navigates her way through new challenges, this story of transformation unfolds, revealing the complexities of trust, ambition, and love. Amidst the tensions of a world steeped in danger, romance stories emerge as the thread that ties everything together. Our protagonist's journey is not just about achieving success in a new life, but about discovering the importance of making bold choices, embracing unexpected opportunities, and finding connection where she least expects it. With each step forward, romance stories become more than just a backdrop. They're a vital part of her path to self-discovery. In this tale of personal growth, we witness a compelling blend of strength, vulnerability, and romance that will resonate with anyone who believes in the power of transformation. The road ahead is full of twists and turns, but one thing is clear. This woman is ready to write her own story, one where love and ambition are intertwined. This is a must-read for anyone who loves romance stories that push the boundaries of what is possible and explore the depths of human resilience.